We as a brand have been speaking to a lot of clients recently with a high number of SKUs on the websites, and they're really struggling with often very tight margins. They're trying to work out how to prioritize high yield areas. How are they going to go about achieving this? Broadly speaking, how should brands with thousands of SKUs be approaching their search marketing strategy?
What can we assume from when we talk about like high SKU sites? Typically, what we're inferring is they're often product first markets, so FMCG. I'm thinking like books, makeup, stuff like that, where quite often you win or lose on things like price and stuff like that. Like, it's not a very brand loyal space because there's just too much stuff to be loyal to. Loads of these conversations. So since probably about November this year, it's come up like the trend of the season in alcoholic drinks, books, cosmetics. They've all said the same thing. Like, we've got really a limited amount of resource and we've got absolutely shed loads of pages, loads of SKUs. It's an absolutely whopping site. Maybe we've got some CMS restrictions in place as well. And we just can't get it all done. Like, how are we supposed to resource there? Our answer has been, for the vast majority of those, it's not necessarily a resourcing issue, it's a decision-making issue. This is the same principle you can apply not just in marketing, but literally in most areas of your life. You always have a limited amount of resource, right? Whatever that is, whether it's physical energy, whether it's time. So the real gains you can get are on decision-making skills and sticking with that decision. Obviously, you can use a fair bit of data and logic to get to the point you made the decision. But if you crack that, what do I mean by if you can crack that? So using the example of a bookseller we spoke to, but you could apply this to most of them. So there are, for bookseller sites, insert alcoholic drinks, cosmetics, whatever, there are some pretty big global things, right? If we understand the where exactly they sit in the market and what kind of customers they appeal to, we can make some wider changes that are maybe around like the overall site layout and how we group certain products and categories and how we serve content of various different areas. But then you're still faced with the problem that they're coming in quite often at a product first level. So if you wanted to influence various clusters of products with signals, that's where the resource issue becomes a real issue, because you've got really limited time. In that problem, like if we flip it away from resource and into a decision-making problem, we've got unlimited data that we can pull from to try and make a decision on what clusters of products, we'll get the global stuff out of the way, we'll do the grouping and how the navigation works and all that sort of stuff. We can sort that. Most agencies can, worth a salt. What data can we use to actually set a roadmap for how we're going to tackle these things? Depending on who you are, what exact market you're in and your customers, that could look really different. But in the booksellers bit again, so say for whatever reason, fiction's a pretty flipping broad category. Like, let's sort fiction. Not gonna happen if you with the biggest amount of resources that you've got. But you might say, okay, well, Philip Pullman, who wrote his Dark Materials, Northern Lights and all that, so what are they? Amber Spyglass sort of knife, I think. How can we want to work on that? Because whatever reason, whether it's our existing products, whether it's PPC data, and we know for some reason we do really well and convert well there, whether it's customer feedback, a vision from the CEO, he loves Philip Pullman, whatever it is, we've decided that's a thing. All of a sudden, all of that big kind of scale issue goes away, right? And you've got a crack squad of people that are just going, how can we make this cluster, this area and this topic, this entity, the best version of what we can? How can we make it better than everyone else for the customers that we want to appeal to? So then you can start looking at things like that. The author page is a central part. It's much smaller than the overall fiction category page. It's much smaller than the speculative fiction category page or young adult or whatever it is. We can look at specifically the author page. So like, how can we engineer that author page, which obviously would start with like listing his books. You might want to start listing them in like chronological orders, or maybe the reason you're wanting to shill David Pullman at the time is because you've got stock of like loads of cool collections or signed copies, or those like cute folio ones with the cloth hardbacks and stuff like that. So let's sort out the author page for it. Can we get like, I don't know, Philip Pullman, don't know him personally, but can we get involvement from him or his publishing house or his agent or just some of his fans? Can we get them involved in the content and start to make that author page the central part of a unique experience for someone who's coming in because they like Philip Pullman, they've heard of him and they want a book, and really they're just coming in because it's cheaper. Can we start to enrich that experience with content being served, the author page being served at the actual novel page to try and drive upsells. If it's the subtle knife they come in and buy, add content and different products that are like, yeah, there's that one, or you can buy it as part of this amazing like cloth bound signed collection. It's a little bit more expensive, but look at all this value around it. All of a sudden, like I've gone off on one there, but like all of a sudden there's so much more to talk about if you see it as that decision making and then make this decision and double down on it. That can be done, and it can be done pretty quickly as well with limited resource. The second you've got that one done, you're on to the next one. And yes, to an extent, you're ignoring loads of other authors. You know, poor J.K. Rowling, I'm trying to think of a list of authors. I've got myself stuck. Shit. All these other authors you're not working on. But if the logic that you've applied to pulling that data in and making that decision is sound, like you should be selling shed loads more Philip Pullman books in that instance. So then let's roll on to the next one. And maybe you could apply it to a bigger cluster where you are doing young adult and you're working on that speculative fiction bit or whatever it is, and you're starting then to build out. You're ignoring the stuff, but you were going to ignore the stuff anyway because you were stuck on that idea of it being a resource issue. So at best, you would have done the global changes and then gone kind of hither and thither and sorted like little tiny tweaks all over the place that would have been a drop in the ocean. So it's not really an option at all. You either do ineffective work by trying to address everything, or you focus on the decision making, make a really strong impact in a specific area.
Don't spread yourself too thin.
Yes.
And make a really awesome site experience for an area that you can perform really well in or give great value in.
Yeah, you can't do it all. It's the same as like the agency life meme, right? When you're working at an agency, there is always more to do than you could possibly do. So it's just about the decision making is the crucial part. Pick what you're doing, do that well.
How much do you think your team's personal preference falls into this?
I think loads. I think it's another one of those data points. Like if you've got, say it's been done in-house by your marketing team, and one of your marketing team members, perhaps the only one that's responsible for some of this content or that understands the kind of strategic elements of it. They like Philip Pullman, but they hate J.K. Rowling. They think that she's all these mean words because of her various controversies. As a data point, like that person is going to get to the right solution quicker, much faster than you would for something that they have no interest in or they dislike. It's not the be all and end all, but I do think it's perhaps one of the unvalued aspects of marketing is utilizing that talent amongst the team. We're not all robots with a kind of beige understanding of everything. Like we have certain interests. As a marketing leader, it's on you to try and utilize that to your best advantage, right?
Playing to your team's passions.
Yep, buddy.
How important is brand loyalty for brands with a high number of SKUs?
So typically, again, on the understanding that we're normally talking about FMCG retailers with shitloads of products. Brand loyalty is a golden goose. It would be lovely to have it, but more often than not, customers are coming in at something like perceived price and value, and perhaps you kind of like trust element. So like your delivery type things, like master of malt and all that kind of like spirits in the drink business. That trustworthiness is a massive part of it because you're usually buying a nice bottle of something for your dad or whatever. So you're up against like the birthday deadlines. They become really important. Brand loyalty less so because you're coming in at product level. So one route to that is someone literally just Googling the exact product that they want. They've made all their decisions. They're quite far down their intent path and they just want the product, and then they're selecting who to get it from. And that's the battleground that a lot of these high SKU sites are competing on. So it is really important, but I think it's more beneficial to think of how can you capture that, or how can you get that audience in and capture them and make them come back. So do that through, how can we get them into an email list? Because once we can do that, then we can send emails with all of our like offers, whether we're doing seasonal sales and things like that. We can start to drive them back. How can we push them to social, where maybe really low touch, we can start to kind of turn them over to us, where you get to the point. So personally for me, I'm at that with Master of Malt, where I'll now go to their site, particularly with like birthday gifts, because I know like they've got a really good selection and I like how their site's laid out and I like the content they deliver. So I'll go to them a lot of the time first. That's quite a rare journey, and like people will get there in the end. But if you imagine, in the makeup world, if you need like a foundation or something like that, you just be like, traditionally it would have been you'd gone to Boots on the high street, the digital equivalent. you're just going like, can I get a deal? Like, what's cheapest? And you're looking there. So yeah, brand loyalty is important. I've gone around the houses a little bit here as an ROI positive activity, because you could be chasing that for a while. Like, how can we capture that audience and retain them?
Yeah. On retaining your audience, how is it you can create distribution channels for your brand?
Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean?
So how is it with that owned audience that you can actually go and create meaningful channels for reaching out to those people which you've already captured?
As in what channels they are?
What channels they are and strategies around them.
The primary ones for me, again, would probably be like email and social, contributing in slightly different ways. But organic search is, or paid media is typically like your starting point for getting them in at that product first level. Exceptions of being elsewhere. But that's when that omnichannel approach becomes really, really prevalent and crucial, because we know done poorly, that initial transaction is 1 + 1. It is the sum of its parts. So employing an omnichannel strategy tries to make 1 = 3 instead of 1 = 1. So the way we can do that is by, again, thinking decision making, deciding what content we're going to do, in the same way that we've sat here and gone, we should really talk about high SKU sites, because we've got loads of them as prospects at the minute. What sort of stuff can we be talking about, and try and unify that across your channels to gain interest, to capture that audience and keep them there.
How can brands foster loyalty and grow customer lifetime value?
So in terms of like growing loyalty, there's a really good example. I think it was Mark Williams Cook on LinkedIn talked about this in an SEO context, and like the idea of you can do everything right on a website and it still takes a lot of time for Google to kind of get it to where it should be based on that. He explains it as it's kind of like meeting someone for the first time, and if you can say all the right things to that person, but they're still not going to trust you straight away. Like, there is a time.
A few dates, eh?
Yeah, you're taking him, buy him a drink. It's the same in this instance, I suppose. Like, there's a time element to that. Again, that we know the price and trust and reliability, particularly around like delivery and customer service and things like that, are huge parts of it. So again, this is we're a search agency, and I'm talking all channel stuff here, but there is a time element to that. The challenge is, like, people will naturally just immediately come straight away from you. So once they've got their product and they're like, well, I've got the cheapest one and I can't remember who you guys are, but it doesn't matter, so I'm off. So again, that's why that crucial bit is around seeing it as, capture the audience. Can we get them on email? Can we get them on social and try and drive engagement through that? The little trick there that you're trying to do is have them around long enough to get enough of those transactions where you get to where I am with Master of Malt. So I've done enough of them now that I just go to those guys. I don't Google around. There probably are cheaper versions, but £3 when I know that these guys get it to me on time, it's not smashed, and even if it is, they'll give me a quick refund or a replacement or something like that. We're just trying to pin them down long enough to hear me out. We're trustworthy on it. So yeah, that's why that capture bit is really important.
You mentioned high SKU websites focusing on particular areas that have a high yield for them. How is it they go about finding those high yield areas? What are the metrics and what's the process that goes involved in that assessment?
There are loads of different data points, and it massively depends on who you are, who you're trying to appeal to, what the makeup of your leadership and team look like. You should already have some idea. Like, I think most businesses do, right? They'll know what's important to them. They'll know what the higher margins are on certain products. If you look at like the bathroom space, for example, like they really like selling like the big like freestanding baths. They're quite like high price. They're often like branded things. They fucking hate selling those bath panels, the ones that just go against like an integrated bath, because you still have to ship them on a crate, but it's like £2 worth of product. So they hate stuff like that. They'll naturally have a ranking. That's probably a primary data point. If in the bookseller space, and it is more down to seasonality, which is another point. Can you look at, you've not approached this yet from improving the website organic SEO point of view. Can you be pulling in things like a PPC, click-through rate data, like you've got existing Performance Max campaigns? You can start to see maybe you perform better in certain genres or authors in a performance sense. You can incorporate that. So we've got margin, seasonality, paid data, again, the personal preference and kind of brand alignment. So at brand level, obviously, sell the stuff that fits in with your brand. If you're selling stuff outside of it, bigger questions. For personal preference, like it could be a data point as well. Like if you got a marketing team into a particular aspect, they could do that much quicker than one they're unfamiliar with. You can look at if you've got somewhat existing organic prominence. Can you look at popular products you've already got that have some performance, an indicator that it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze. I'm using a lot of cancel people today. There, that was Lizzo, wasn't it?
You fit Bill Cosby in anywhere. How can high SKU websites cluster high yield categories that create a positive web experience? In terms of navigation, so what's the process of finding these high yield areas, clustering them that ultimately produce a positive navigation, but also do all the things that you mentioned around creating brand loyalty, and actually just being like a really great experience. I suppose, do you think about it that way? So you focus on one area, you make it good, and then you just make all your other areas good, and naturally people navigate around the website based on interest.
Yeah, it's the cluster. Cluster's an abstract term that could mean any size really when we're talking digital stuff, right? So what's the biggest cluster of things that we can reasonably have a big impact in over a set period, whether that's a quarter or a year or whatever? You can't answer that not knowing the brand that we're talking about. Obviously things like utilization of like the mega nav is really important. Like make sure we're putting the important stuff for what the users want, as soon as possible on the mega nav. Trying to avoid doing the like old school SEO style of just getting everything and its auntie in the mega nav. There's hundreds of links because it just looks confusing and ugly. But also thinking about in terms of clustering, like where else can we be serving content? By content I mean products or like content with purchase intent, so like buying guides, content in a consideration sense of people understanding that they need a thing and that they're now trying to understand a bit more around exactly what type of that thing they need, or in an awareness sense where they've just got a problem and they're not aware that there's a solution yet. Some of those kind of higher up the funnel pieces can also be served. And this is one of the things we talk about quite a lot, where brands just kind of, they have their shop and then they've just got the blog over there, like, and it's like the laundry room. It's never the two meet. A huge exercise in value is thinking about like, is that content good? Is it doing what we want it to do? And if that's right, like there's a massive interlinking piece you can do there to incorporate it in part of the website, which is done best a reflection of the user journey from problem to bought your product and beyond.
Any advice for like stakeholders who are facing that decision paralysis?
Make a decision. Make it now. What is it, right? If you've not done it, the simplest solution is you've just not recognized that the decision-making part is important. Like we've just got to make a decision and you're overwhelmed and you're like, fuck me, I've only got one person in the team, which is still doable, right? If you've got one person in the team, you're just getting a lot less done than someone who's got 10 people in the team. It might be simply a recognition of that, like we need to just hone in on something and go, is it a kind of internal storytelling and politics thing? I.e., I'm a marketing manager or I'm a CMO and I'm really struggling to get this vision of where we want to take X through to everyone else. And that, everyone's a salesperson at some point in their job and life, right? Is it that narrative exercise? And if so, what can I utilize to get that across? What are their pain points? How can I show it through their lens to get buy-in? They might disagree, but you got to get there. You've got to get there. So figure out a way to have that conversation at least. The other one might be just a lack of data. We do see this quite a lot with, all the time. But again, when GA4 came out and everyone was like, yeah, I've sorted GA4, all of a sudden Universal Analytics isn't working anymore. We were like, we've not sorted GA4. We don't have a clue what's going on. Is it a data problem? Like, can you trust your data? Can you rely on it? And if that, probably one of the latter ones that you can build on to go, okay, what data can I utilize to adequately tell my story and sell it into the people it needs to be sold into, whether that's internal stakeholders or whether it's literally executing it for the web.